we talked a little bit about how the love of a parent can be foundational, how it can provide, the witness to our life. But I wonder about those relationships that are much more fraught and difficult, where there's unresolved issues between a parent and child, and how that complicates our experience of grief, and what people do when they've lost a parent, but actually they're very ambivalent in terms of their feelings.
So, I mean, nothing is always, the tendency that happens is that you would assume there'd be a sense of relief when finally this parent who you've never been able to get their attention from, or their approval, or there's been this kind of longing for something, has finally died, and you're left at peace. But actually the reverse happens, because now you're faced with the reality that you will never have the hope that you can resolve that complexity and that difficulty. And so often, if you had an ambivalent relationship with your parent, you have an ambivalent grief. And that is more likely to be a complex, unresolved grief, because, well, for obvious reasons. When you have a very loving, secure relationship, you tend not to have regrets. So although it's painful, it's quite straightforward, it's quite clean. But when it's very complicated, you bring back all the memories of what you wanted to have and what you wished you could have. And you, in some ways, grieve them again in the knowledge that I can never get it now. And that is very painful. And it's a long old process.
We do hear, all the time about wanting to talk to the person who has died, that there's always more things to say. And again, that's, even more the case, I guess, when the relationship is complicated. And you've talked before about some of the kind of strategies. If you have things that you want to say to a parent who's died, what can one do? What are the kind of, techniques?
I mean, I think I think a lot of people think that they're mad talking to their parent, but I think I don't know anyone who doesn't talk to someone who's died. I mean, we just do. We talk to them in our heads, or sometimes we speak it out loud. But it's because they're part of us. And I remember a client saying to me once, heaven is the place I am remembered. So in that way that when you're remembered someone, that's where they are in you, in your heart or in your memory. And I think making kind of concrete letters, postcards, speaking into your phone, like in some way creating a communication to the person that's died, is incredibly helpful, because grief is invisible. Everything is below the waterline, so nobody knows what's going on. And if you can actually make it concrete by writing a letter, by writing a postcard, and doing it ongoing, and it can become a journal, it can just be letters that you file. It's a very cathartic process. So if someone who's, for instance, had a complicated relationship with their parent, I would suggest kind of going through their memories, writing them down and just getting them out. Because in the narrative, we're story meaning-making beings. And in the narrative of telling themselves a story of what's happened to them, it can help them understand and have much more clarity, because it's the child that's hurt. And so the adult can look back at the child and go, oh my God, so rather than having that unvoiced child that needs connection, you kind of pay attention to the child, and the child finds a way of having a voice. And that can be incredibly curative.